Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going deep, really deep, into a system that's running 24/7, keeping you, well, you.
That's right, the endocrine system.
It's the ultimate internal communication network, making sure everything from growth to stress response is working as it should.
It really is a fascinating system, and today we'll be breaking it down using some research on the fundamentals of endocrinology.
Most people know about the nervous system, but how is the endocrine system different?
Well, think about it this way. The nervous system, that's like a text message. Super fast, direct to one person.
Instant communication, got it.
Now, the endocrine system, that's more like sending a postcard.
Okay, a little slower.
Much slower. But those messages, delivered through the bloodstream by hormones, can potentially reach every cell in your body.
So less about a targeted message and more like a general broadcast that any cell with the right receptor can pick up.
Exactly.
Ah.
And because hormones travel through the blood, their effects are, like I said, slower to start, but they last much longer.
Which explains why things like growth and mood, which are regulated by hormones, take time to change.
Precisely.
So we've got the nervous system for instant responses and the endocrine system for those longer-term processes. Fascinating.
It really is an elegant system.
I'm curious, what would you say is the evolutionary advantage of having both?
Well, imagine our early ancestors. They needed that nervous system to react quickly to danger.
Like run from a saber-toothed tiger.
Right. But they also needed the endocrine system to regulate things like growth and development.
Which happen over a much longer timescale.
Exactly. Having both systems gave them the flexibility to respond to both immediate threats and those long-term challenges.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like having a sprinter for those quick bursts and a marathon runner for endurance. I noticed our source material actually breaks down some of the differences between the two systems in a handy table.
Oh yes, it highlights some really key distinctions.
Things like speed, duration, and even how the messages get around.
And one of the big differences is how the signal strength is actually determined.
How so?
Well, the nervous system relies on the frequency of nerve impulses.
So more frequent impulses mean a stronger signal.
Right. But the endocrine system, that relies on hormone concentration.
So the more hormone in the blood, the stronger the message, like turning up the volume.
Exactly. Now, another interesting thing is how hormones are received. Some act locally, sort of like talking to your neighbor.
Wait, are we talking about like actual gossiping neighbors here?
No, not quite. What we call paracrine signaling is where a cell releases a hormone that acts on nearby cells, but not the same type of cell.
Okay, so a localized message.
Right. And then there's autocrine signaling, where a cell releases a hormone that acts on itself, like leaving yourself a reminder note.
So the endocrine system uses all these different signaling methods, broadcasting through the bloodstream, localized messages, and even talking to itself. It seems pretty versatile.
Incredibly so. And we're just getting started. Up next, we'll delve into the fascinating world of hormones themselves, those tiny but mighty chemical messengers.
Okay, let's do it. So we know hormones are the key players in the endocrine system, but what are they actually doing at the cellular level?
Well, it's not as simple as just delivering a message. Hormones are like master regulators.
In what way?
Well, they've got all sorts of tools they can use to influence cellular activity. For one, they can actually change a cell's membrane permeability.
So controlling what can go in and out of the cells.
Exactly. But they can also do things like stimulate protein synthesis.
Which is basically the process of building new proteins.
Right. And proteins are essential for just about every function in the body. Plus, hormones can activate or deactivate enzymes, too.
Those are like the tiny machines that speed up chemical reactions inside cells.
Exactly. And by controlling these enzymes, hormones can really fine-tune all sorts of cellular processes.
Wow, so they can change what goes in and out of the cell, build new structures inside the cell, and even control the speed of reactions within the cell. Anything else?
Well, they can even trigger the release of other substances, too. So, for example, one hormone might stimulate a cell to release another chemical messenger, creating a kind of cascade of effects throughout the body.
Like a chain reaction.
Exactly.
That's incredible. But with all this power, how do hormones make sure they're only acting on the right cells? I mean, they are traveling through the entire bloodstream after all.
That's where receptors come in.
Okay, remind me how those work again.
Well, each hormone has a very specific shape that fits perfectly with receptors on its target cells.
Like a lock and key.
Exactly. Only cells with the matching receptor can bind to that particular hormone.
So only cells with the right password get the message.
I like that analogy. And it's a brilliant way to make sure hormones only affect the cells they're supposed to.
Right, because without that specificity, the endocrine system would be pure chaos with hormones triggering all sorts of unintended effects. What happens when things go wrong? Like when there's a hormonal imbalance?
Well, as you can imagine, when you have a communication network this complex and this important, if it gets disrupted, it can have some pretty significant consequences.
So we're talking more than just like a few minor
Oh
glitches.
yeah, hormonal imbalances can manifest in a whole range of ways. It really depends on which hormone is affected and how severe the imbalance is.
Give me some examples.
Sure, you could have growth disorders, problems with metabolism, problems with reproduction, even things like mood swings and difficulty sleeping.
So everything from our physical growth to our emotional well-being relies on this delicate balance of hormones.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to understand how the endocrine system works, because it really highlights just how crucial it is to overall health. Now, I know you're eager to explore the specific glands themselves.
Absolutely. We talked about them earlier, the pituitary, thyroid, parathyroid, adrenal glands, each one playing its own unique role in this grand orchestra.
That's right. And we'll start with the pituitary gland, often called the master gland. It might be small, tucked away at the base of the brain, but it really is a powerhouse.
Okay, tell me more about this master conductor. What makes it so important?
Well, the pituitary gland actually releases a variety of hormones that regulate the activity of other endocrine glands. It's like the CEO of the endocrine system, sending out directives to its team of specialists.
So it's not just producing hormones, it's actually controlling other glands too.
Exactly. And it's involved in so many things. It controls growth, regulates metabolism, orchestrates reproduction, even plays a role in water balance and stress response.
Wow, it really is calling the shots.
It is, and that's just one gland.
Okay, I'm ready to hear about the rest. What's next on our gland tour?
Next up, we've got the thyroid gland, that butterfly-shaped structure in your neck. It plays a really critical role in regulating your metabolism.
The thyroid. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. I've always wondered about that connection between thyroid function and metabolism. Can you unpack that a little more for me?
Of course. The thyroid gland mainly produces hormones like thyroxine, which act like little thermostats, controlling how fast your cells burn energy.
I see. So if your thyroid is overactive, producing too much thyroxine, your metabolism speeds up.
Exactly. You might feel restless or lose weight.
And if it's underactive, not producing enough.
Your metabolism slows down, you might feel sluggish and gain weight.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, that balance where your metabolism is humming along perfectly.
You got it. And the thyroid's impact goes beyond just energy production, too. It also affects protein synthesis and plays a role in regulating your heart rate and body temperature.
So it sounds like it's pretty essential for keeping a stable internal environment, making sure everything runs smoothly.
Exactly. And speaking of keeping things balanced, we can't forget about the parathyroid glands.
The calcium quarterbacks.
Yes. These tiny but mighty glands, there's usually 4 of them, they sit on the back of the thyroid gland and they secrete parathyroid hormone.
And that's the hormone that makes sure you have just the right amount of calcium in your blood.
Exactly. Too much calcium, and you can end up with problems like kidney stones and weakened bones.
And too little.
You can get muscle spasms and even seizures.
Wow, it really is a delicate balancing act. Okay, what about the adrenal glands? I know those are involved in our fight or flight response.
You're right. The adrenal glands produce adrenaline, also known as epinephrine, which surges through your body when you face stress or danger.
So that's what gives us that burst of energy to either confront a threat or run away to safety, like our own personal superpower.
You could say that.
What happens when that stress is chronic, though? Does that put extra strain on the adrenal glands?
That's a great question, and it's something researchers are still studying. Chronic stress can lead to prolonged elevation of another hormone the adrenals produce.
Cortisol, right.
While cortisol is beneficial in short bursts, helping us manage stress, long-term exposure can have some negative effects.
Like what kinds of effects?
It can contribute to anxiety, sleep disturbances, even a weakened immune system.
So it's like having those superpowers activated all the time. At first it seems great, but eventually it starts to take its toll.
That's a great way to put it.
It's a good reminder that while these hormones are powerful, we do have some control over their activity through things like managing stress and making healthy lifestyle choices.
Absolutely.
Okay, what about the pineal gland? That one has always seemed a little mysterious to me, buried deep within the brain.
It does have an air of mystery about it, doesn't it? The pineal gland produces melatonin.
Ah, the sleep hormone.
Exactly. Melatonin helps regulate your sleep-wake cycle, making sure you're in sync with those natural rhythms of day and night.
So when I start feeling sleepy as the sun goes down, I can thank my pineal gland for that.
You got it. And if you have trouble falling asleep, it might be a sign that your pineal gland isn't producing enough melatonin.
Are there things that can affect melatonin production?
Definitely. Exposure to bright light, especially blue light from screens, can suppress melatonin production.
That makes sense. No wonder I feel so groggy after scrolling on my phone all night. My poor pineal gland must be exhausted. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from comparing the endocrine system to snail mail and radio broadcast to unpacking the roles of all these incredible glands and hormones.
It's been quite the journey.
It really has. But before we wrap things up, one final question for you. We've talked about how our lifestyle choices can impact hormone production.
Things like managing stress, limiting screen time.
Exactly. But what about things outside of our control, like environmental pollutants? Could those be messing with our hormones too?
That's a great question, and it's something that researchers are looking into more and more. There's growing evidence that certain environmental chemicals, what we call endocrine disruptors, can actually interfere with how hormones function.
Meaning they can mimic or block hormone activity.
Right. And that has the potential to disrupt those delicate hormonal balances we've been talking about.
So these chemicals can essentially sneak into our bodies and wreak havoc on our endocrine systems.
It's a complex issue, and we need more research to fully understand the extent of the problem.
It definitely sounds like something to be aware of. So, are there any other glands we should talk about? I think we've covered most of them, right?
Well, we've talked about the pituitary, thyroid, parathyroid, and adrenals, but there are a couple more key players I think are worth mentioning.
Okay, which ones?
The pancreas and the gonads.
The pancreas. I always thought of that as being part of the digestive system.
Yeah, it definitely is. But it's a bit of a multitasker. See, tucked away behind the stomach, the pancreas contains these clusters of cells.
What are they called?
They're called the islets of Langerhans.
Islets of Langerhans. Interesting name.
Right. And these islets, they produce two very important hormones,
Which ones?
insulin and glucagon. Remember when we were talking about how hormones regulate blood sugar?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, insulin and glucagon, they're the stars of that show.
Right. Insulin helps cells absorb glucose from the blood, which lowers blood sugar levels. And glucagon does the opposite.
You got it. Glucagon raises blood sugar levels by stimulating the liver to release stored glucose. It's like a backup generator, kicking in when blood sugar runs low.
Ah, so the pancreas is constantly monitoring those blood sugar levels, releasing insulin when they get too high and glucagon when they dip too low.
Precisely. It's like a finely tuned thermostat for our energy supply.
Very cool. Okay, what about the gonads? Those are the testes in males and ovaries in females, right?
Right.
I know they're involved in reproduction, but what's their connection to the endocrine system?
Well, the gonads are endocrine glands too, producing hormones that are absolutely crucial for sexual development and reproduction.
Like testosterone and estrogen.
Exactly. Testosterone, mainly produced in the testes, is responsible for those male secondary sex characteristics.
Like facial hair and a deeper voice.
Right. It also plays a role in muscle mass and bone density.
And estrogen, produced by the ovaries, drives the development of female secondary sex characteristics, like breast development and the menstrual cycle.
And it's also important for bone health, among other things. It really is amazing how these hormones orchestrate the development of our unique sexual characteristics and reproductive abilities.
I know. It's like they're shaping who we are, both physically and in some ways behaviorally. So much of our development relies on this delicate interplay of hormones. You know, we were talking earlier about how environmental factors can mess with hormone function. Could they potentially interfere with sexual development as well?
That's a great question, and it's definitely an area of active research. There's growing concern that exposure to some environmental chemicals could be contributing to some developmental issues related to reproduction and sexual health.
Wow, that's pretty concerning. It seems like the more we learn about the endocrine system, the more we realize how interconnected it is with every aspect of our health and well-being.
Absolutely. And it just highlights how important it is to understand this complex system, both for our own health and for the health of future generations.
Well, listener, I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the fascinating world of the endocrine system. From the master conductor, the pituitary gland, to the calcium quarterbacks, the parathyroid glands, we've seen how this network of glands and hormones works tirelessly behind the scenes to keep our bodies functioning smoothly.
A true symphony of chemical messengers, orchestrating growth, metabolism, reproduction, stress response, and so much more.
And we've learned that it's a system that deserves our attention and care. By understanding how our lifestyle choices and environmental exposures can impact hormone function, we can empower ourselves to make healthier choices for both ourselves and the planet. Until next time, stay curious.